Today you're going to work through these 3 different value scales when learning to mix and use your acrylic paints. Just like we did with our watercolor, we're going to do tint and shade, but we're going to add one more in there that's called a tone. A tint, as you know, is when you add white. So with acrylic, we actually have white paint. So instead of the white of our paper or water, we are going to use the white paint in order to create a lighter tint as we move through the value scale. A tone is very similar to a tint and a shade, except for the fact that it uses gray. So this is a really good way to start muting your colors if you don't want something as harsh as black. It's a great way to kind of tone it down a little bit, and that's a good way to remember it. A shade, again, as we know, is whenever you mix black. So what we're going to do is we're going to get our pages set up with 3 long and thin rectangles. You can do this however you want, or you can mimic what I did here. I just drew these using my ruler, and then I labeled each one so I knew which order I was going to go in. Now, whenever we get started, you will first start on the tint. So on my paint palette, I'm going to get red, white, and black. You can choose whichever color you want to. And I'm going to start on the left side with a true red so that I can begin moving up and blending my paint. I'm going to do a combination of mixing it in my tray and on my paper just so I can get it nice and blended. Our acrylic paint can act kind of thin sometimes and be a little bit tougher to blend, so you'll want to test some of those colors out if you need to as you move through your value scale. Try to get these as smooth as you can, but try to make this some practice. Pay attention to how the paint works. Use this as time to practice with your brush techniques and all of those things. So as I move up the tint chart, or the side of the tint scale, I'm going to continue adding a little bit of white each time I move through this chart. And you'll see as I get towards the end, it's going to become lighter and lighter and lighter, closer to a pink. And I'm going to try to get a true white at the end as best as I can. And you might have to come back in and blend a little bit on top of it just to get those nice smooth transitions. You can use a little bit of water with acrylic, but I would be very careful in doing that because that's going to make it runny. And that's also going to mess with the quality of your paper at times. So as I move into my tone chart, remember that that's adding gray. So I'm going to have to mix a gray because we don't have a gray paint. So that's going to be black and white. I'm going to do my best to keep my mixing as clean as I can. So watching whenever I have colors within within another light color. And we're going to use this tint shade just like we did, or this tone shade just like we did our tint scale. So as I work through my tint scale, I'm going to start a little bit differently on this one just so you can see how the colors are affected when you add a little bit. I'm going to start on the right side with the true gray. And as I put this down, I realized that my gray was a little too dark, a little bit too heavy on the black side, so I'm going to fix that. And then as I move to the other side of this value scale, I'm just going to add a little bit more of true red, a little bit more, and a little bit more each time until I hit the other side with a true red. And you'll notice as I move closer and closer towards the red side, it becomes less muted, and that color becomes a little bit more vibrant. This is a really good skill or a really good technique whenever you're wanting to have a little bit more of a monochromatic look. You can add, which monochromatic means of one hue, so of one color. It's where you have different tint shades and tones of one hue. This is a really good thing to use whenever you're doing that in your painting, just to kind of tone down, or even if you're wanting to do something black and white, add a warm or cool bias to your hue. And then as I finish that one out, I am going to move on to our last one, which is a shade, and I'm going to start this one on the left side so you can see it. And just like we did on our watercolor, each time I move up that scale a little bit, I'm just going to add a dot of black. So always remember, gray and black can go a long way. They are pretty potent, which means they're pretty strong, and if you mix them, they're going to definitely overpower whatever hue you have. So I would do that carefully and just pay attention and do a little bit at a time. And don't be afraid to come back in and add some red if you need to in order to make those nice, smooth transitions. Again, use this as a time to practice that paint blending. All paints work differently. So these acrylic paints that we have are going to function different than any other paints that you've used. So just really use this as a time to get to know your medium. So that way when we start our final pieces, you will be good to go. Once you get that completed, you will have an awesome tint, tone, and shade chart to refer back to. If you want to do a couple of these, do some maybe with a warm color and then some, or do one with maybe a cooler color like a red and then a blue, you are welcome to do that. You could even do a couple different hues on one page. So let's say you want to split your page in half and you wanted to do a red series, a green series, and a purple series, just so you can see how some of that stuff functions. That is totally fine. Artists do that kind of practice all the time, especially when they're using a new product or a new medium. That's up to you. Take your time on these. Really use this as a time to learn and practice and get to know your acrylic paint.